Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review for you all, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from Japan, Japanese language English subs, released in the year 1991, directed by Shozin Fukui. This film is called 964 Pinocchio. So 964 Pinocchio is about this cyborg sex slave who is working in this house full of women. The cyborg sex slave is unable to maintain his performance, so he's thrown out onto the street, he's discarded. Because he's so oblivious to the outside world, he's just wandering around aimlessly until he's adopted by a woman who appears harmless on the outside, but on the inside she's quite insane. And this is where insanity prevails. And so what that insanity is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on 964 Pinocchio. I didn't have massive expectations for this film based on the fact that it's a cyberpunk movie. Now the cyberpunk subgenre in Japanese film industry is a very unique and very interesting, but it is for a very acquired taste, and not everyone's going to like it. So Tetsuo the Iron Man was the first cyberpunk film that I've seen from Japan, and I will say that although I was impressed by how ballsy that film was, I still thought as though it had a lot of shortcomings because it was relying on the novelty of being a cyberpunk film a little bit too much, and so that was my skepticism coming into 964 Pinocchio. Now what cyberpunk is all about is like what punk music is all about. It's like sticking its middle finger up at the mainstream crowd and making no apologies for it. Basically making music, and in this case making films, based on what they want, and they're not going to be influenced by the outside world. And so it is definitely a little community, and so that is something that I can appreciate, is that they're willing to be different, and that's what punk music really brought to the table. And so if you are a rebellious kind of person, then punk is definitely going to appeal to you. But cyberpunk, as far as Japanese cinema is concerned, as I said, it's for a very acquired taste. If you like your traditional filmmaking, if you like your traditional sort of characters and situations, then this is not for you. But as I said, that really understands what the punk sort of movement is all about. And so 964 Pinocchio is definitely not as heard of as Tetsuo the Iron Man, but I had my excitement based on the fact that you never know what you're going to get. And after finally watching 964 Pinocchio, I will say that it is insane. This is a frenetic, loud, chaotic film that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it doesn't really promise to make a lot of sense. As I said, it's sticking its middle finger up at traditional methods of storytelling, and it's making its own universe, it's making its own world, and it's making its own experience. And its own experience is definitely what it achieves. This is a film that doesn't make you feel comfortable. As I said, the unconventional way of storytelling makes you feel very vulnerable, and it makes you feel very uncomfortable, and it is a very intense, extreme ride. This is a nasty film. There are moments that left me scratching my head thinking, what the hell am I watching? And that was everything that I wanted from this experience. And so it does deliver on that promise, but unfortunately there's one major issue that makes it lack in as far as quality is concerned, and this is my problem with cyberpunk, and being that outside influence, being that rebellious influence. Unfortunately, there is one major problem that actually affected Tetsuo the Iron Man as well, which is something I'll go into a little bit later. But as I said, this is a nightmare-filled film. There are some visuals in this movie that made me feel very uneasy. The sound effects, there's a lot of screaming. It's a very frenetically paced film, and it's a very brutal film. And so if you like that kind of thing, I definitely feel as though 964 Pinocchio is going to appeal to you. It is a movie that goes for an hour and a half, and I do have issues with that, but it's not an overly long experience, and so it's going to be over before you really start to feel as though it's outstaying its welcome. And the soundtrack, as I said, very cyberpunk, and so everything about punk is thrown into this movie to make it just a one insane, hellish descent into hell. And so it is a movie that almost takes place in a different universe, and so as I said, that just has a really uncomfortable quality to it. But unfortunately, having that cyberpunk thrown in there, yes, it does make for a very unique experience, but it just bases itself on its novelty, and after a while you start to notice that it doesn't really have any sense of control. And without control, you start to lose your sense of connection. And so this is a film that definitely needed a lot of editing. There are scenes that were way too long for its own good, and I thought, okay, you've made your point, now get on to the next moment. And this is against what cyberpunk is. Cyberpunk is that sense of loss of control, but unfortunately this movie, the loss of control in the editing process just made it lag a little bit, and so you're on this intense roller coaster, but there were moments where the roller coaster just slowed right down, and then it picked up in speed, and then it slowed right down. So the continuity and the frequency and the pacing was very inconsistent, and that's something that I really noticed. And the hour and a half runtime was definitely the film's biggest weakness, because Tetsuo the Iron Man, once that novelty ran off, it only went for an hour, so it was over before you knew it. So you didn't really notice it as much as you noticed it in 964 964 Pinocchio. And so the whole film has very brave filmmaking, it's very brave acting. I thought the actors did a fantastic job in what is, as I said, a hellish nightmare. But unfortunately, it's the editing process and that's the sense of loss of control as far as production is concerned that really hurts this movie. And so it is extreme, it is definitely very unique, and it does have a cult following, and I can understand why. But unfortunately, it just needed a little bit more behind it to really push forward that sense of punk rock and punk cinema, the punk cinema movement, to make it that rebellious message that really stood out, instead of making that rebellious message that really does filter out and fizzer out by the time it finishes. And so that was the biggest issue I had with this movie, but it's still very unique. It is creative and it's unlike anything that you've seen before. And so as a result of that, I'm going to give 964 Pinocchio 2.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies and I'll see you later.